I used to think I was the problem, that if I worked harder, stayed quieter, or shone brighter, she'd see me. But no matter what I did, my mother's eyes never lingered on me the way they did on my sisters. Never with admiration, never with affection, just a cold distance. My name is Zephyr, and growing up, I was the shadow in my own home. My mother, Veronica, wasn't loud or harsh. She didn't need to be. Her silence was a blade, cutting deeper than words ever could. When I aced my exams in middle school, she barely glanced at my report card. But when my sister Quilla got a B after struggling, Vionica framed it like a masterpiece, saying, "That's my girl." I was 11 when it hit me. It was Mother's Day. I'd spent days carving a wooden photo frame, sanding it smooth, etching her initials. I gave it to her after breakfast, my chest tight with hope. She looked at it, said, "Nice," and set it aside to sip her coffee. 10 minutes later, my sister Zira handed her a cheap scarf from the mall, and Veronica lit up like she'd been given diamonds. I stood there, frame forgotten, wondering why I wasn't enough. It always came down to that. I wasn't enough. Quila and Zira were her stars. Quila was the artist. Her paintings hung proudly in the living room. Zira was the social butterfly, charming everyone with her quick wit. Me? I was the quiet one, the odd one, the boy who spent hours tinkering with circuits in the garage. My dad, Torin, tried to soften the blow. He'd pat my shoulder and say, "You're doing great, kid." But even he knew the pecking order. If Quilla wanted new paints, she got them. If Zira needed cash for a trip, Vionica handed it over. I asked for a soldering kit once, and Vionica said, "Why bother? You'll lose interest." That stung more than she'd ever know. At dinner, I'd sit silently while Vionica asked my sisters about their dreams, their days, their lives. She never asked me. If I spoke, I'd get a tight smile or a vague nod. I learned to stay quiet, to fade into the background of their spotlight. But something was brewing inside me. Not just hurt, but something fiercer. Resolve. A fire I couldn't name. I started pushing myself harder, not for her approval, but to prove I mattered, even if only to myself. I stopped chasing her love. I focused on building a life she couldn't overlook. I was done being the forgotten son. One day, I vowed she'd see me, not as the quiet boy she ignored, but as the man who reshaped everything. If you stepped into our home during the holidays, you'd think it was a picture-perfect scene. Laughter from the kitchen, my sisters decorating cookies, Vionica beaming with a glass of wine. But I knew the truth. I knew what it felt like to be a ghost in someone else's story. My sisters, Quilla and Zira, were born to dazzle, at least in Vionica's eyes. Quilla could sketch a masterpiece and have Vionica gushing for days. Zira could charm anyone with a smile, and Vionica would brag about her like she was royalty. They had their own rituals, matching aprons for baking, late-night chats I was never invited to. I once watched from the stairs as Quilla showed Vionica a new painting. Vionica looked at her like she'd hung the moon. "You're going places, sweetheart," she said, hugging her. I'd built a working robot that same week, but when I showed her, she just said, "Cute hobby." My dad, Torin, quieter than Vionica, noticed my work sometimes. Once, when I got into a prestigious STEM program, he smiled and said, "Good work, Zephyr." But Vionica? She barely acknowledged it, muttering, "That's nice." Between sips of coffee, I poured myself into my projects, coding late into the night, taking odd jobs to buy parts. I won small competitions, earned scholarships, but my victories never sparkled in her eyes. At family dinners, Vionica would rave about Quilla's art shows or Zira's debate wins. I'd mention my internship at a tech firm, and she'd nod, then pivot back to my sisters. "Anyway, Quilla, tell us about your gallery meeting." The message was clear. They were the stars, I was the extra. The worst part? I didn't hate my sisters. They weren't mean to me. They loved the attention, sure, but they didn't push me aside. It was Vionica who did that, and I couldn't figure out why. I tried everything, helping with chores, excelling in school, staying out of trouble. Nothing worked. Sometimes I wondered if she even noticed how her favoritism broke me. Other times, I was sure she knew and didn't care. I told myself to move on, to not need her approval, but deep down, I still wanted it. Just once, I wanted her to say, "I'm proud of you, Zephyr." That moment never came, but another one did, one that would flip the script entirely. It was supposed to be my triumph, the result of years of grinding, skipping parties, and wrestling with doubt. I'd built a startup, a cutting-edge app set to disrupt the local tech scene. It wasn't just a project, it was every late night, every rejection, every quiet spark of defiance. The launch was in a polished downtown venue, packed with investors, tech bloggers, and industry insiders. My hands shook as I took the stage, heart racing like it might burst. I spoke about my vision, the obstacles I'd overcome, the future my app could create. The room was wrapped, hanging on my words. For the first time, I felt visible, valued for what I'd built. After, people swarmed me, handshakes, praise, even a venture capitalist saying, "This could be big." I let myself feel proud, just for a moment. But that pride would soon shatter. Later that week, we had a family dinner, the usual parade of my sister's achievements. The dining room glowed softly, but the air was heavy with the same old hierarchy. Quila and Zira strolled in, brimming with confidence, trading stories of their latest wins. Vionica sat at the head of the table, soaking it all in. The talk turned to accomplishments, and I waited for a chance to share mine. I expected a nod, a flicker of respect. Instead, Vionica launched into praise for Quila's new mural and Zyra's scholarship. I cleared my throat. "I just launched my startup," I said, voice steady. Before I could continue, Vionica waved a hand. "That's great, Zephyr, but let's not bore everyone." The table went quiet, awkward. That dismissal, that casual brush-off, hit like a slap. I remembered all the times my wins were ignored, drowned out by my sister's spotlight. In that moment, every overlooked effort, every half-hearted nod, crashed over me. Something snapped. Not anger, but clarity. I realized I'd never get the approval I'd chased for so long. Sitting there, watching Vionica fawn over my sisters, I knew I couldn't keep playing this role. I'd build something so undeniable she couldn't ignore me. And if she did, she'd face the consequences of her neglect. After that dinner, I shut down, not in defeat, but in focus. I stopped seeking her validation. I didn't argue or plead for attention. I went quiet. I moved to a small apartment across town, diving into my startup like it was my lifeline. Money was tight. Some nights, I ate instant noodles and worked by a flickering lamp. Doubt crept in, but every time it did, I pushed back harder. I learned to code better, pitch sharper, and handle rejection with grit. My sister's social media posts stung. Quila at art galas, Zira at award ceremonies, Vionica always there, beaming. But I didn't stop. I worked in silence. No family updates, just relentless effort. Clients started noticing, saying, "You get it, Zephyr." Those words meant more than Vionica's ever could. A year later, my app took off. Users grew, an investor jumped in with funding, and I hired a small team. People who, like me, knew what it felt like to be underestimated. We built something extraordinary. I stayed quiet about it, letting my family think I was still the same invisible boy. But I was changing. My confidence grew, my voice steadied, my presence demanded space. I bought a car, signed a lease for a modern office, and made choices without hesitation. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I was building for me. For the first time, I saw myself in the mirror and didn't wince. I wasn't the forgotten son. I was someone who'd fought his way out of the shadows. I hadn't been home in 2 years. No birthdays, no holidays, no calls. The silence was mutual. No one checked on me, and I didn't expect them to. Being invisible had become my strength. But this year, I decided to return for Mother's Day dinner. I sent a quick, "I'll be there" to the family chat, met with emojis and silence. The night before, I stood in a dealership, signing for a sleek silver sports car under a new last name I'd taken after launching my business. They wouldn't know it. No one had asked what I was up to. In my bag was a slim gray envelope, its contents heavy with intent. Mother's Day came. I dressed sharply, not to impress, but to reflect who I'd become. The car's engine growled as I pulled into the driveway. My sisters were there, laughing, glasses clinking. Veronica sat at the table's head, radiant as ever. Her eyes caught mine, a flicker of surprise, then a smile. "Well, look who's here." The table turned, their stares a mix of curiosity and judgment. "Happy Mother's Day, Veronica," I said calmly. Dinner was the usual. Quilla's art, Zira's awards, Veronica soaking it in. Then I stood, the room quieting. "I brought you something, Veronica." I walked outside, leaving the door open. I drove the car closer, its silver gleam impossible to miss. Back inside, I placed the envelope before her. "For you," gasps followed. "Is that a car?" Zira asked, peering out. Quilla frowned. "You bought that?" Veronica looked at the envelope, confused. "What's this?" "Open it," I said, voice steady. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the paper. Her face froze, then paled. "What is this?" she snapped, glaring at me. I smiled faintly. "Read it closely, you'll understand." I turned, walked out, and slid into the car. As I drove off, her shout echoed behind me. The envelope held the deed to the gallery she'd worked at for years, now mine through a silent acquisition. Happy Mother's Day. The house hadn't changed, polished, pristine, cold. My dad, Torin, hovered quietly, refilling drinks, forcing smiles. My sisters, tipsy and loud, filled the air with their triumphs. I sat at the table's end, the envelope in my bag like a heartbeat. The car keys rested in my pocket, the silver car parked in plain sight. Veronica led the conversation, praising Quilla's latest exhibit, Zira's new fellowship. "So, how's work, Veronica?" Quilla asked, sipping wine. Veronica laughed. "Demanding, but not everyone can handle it. Takes real talent." She glanced at Zira. "Good thing I've got 2 daughters who shine." I stayed silent, but her eyes flicked to me. "And then there's Zephyr," she said with a smirk. "Still tinkering in the garage, huh?" Laughter erupted. Quilla coughed on her drink. Zira grinned, slapping the table. I didn't react, just waited. When the laughter faded, I stood slowly. "I brought you a gift, Veronica," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. She looked puzzled. "What's this?" "Open it," I replied, stepping back. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the page. Confusion turned to shock, then dread. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. "You know the gallery you manage?" I said softly. "It's mine now. I acquired it last week." Silence crashed over the room. I leaned in. "So, no, I'm not tinkering in the garage. I'm the one who owns your world." Her jaw dropped. Quilla went pale. Zira's glass froze midair. "That car outside?" I nodded toward the window. "Part of the deal, but it's mine." I walked out, the engine's roar drowning out her scream, fear, not anger. As I drove away, the weight of years lifted. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I could imagine the chaos behind me. Veronica clutching the paper, hands shaking, staring at the words that stripped her control. Quilla and Zira, stunned, leaning over her shoulder. "What's it say?" Quilla would ask, voice trembling. It's the gallery," Veronica would mutter, her face drained. "He owns it. All of it." Zira, always bold, would stammer. "How? When?" Veronica's voice would crack. "He didn't tell us. He didn't need to." The sisters who'd never seen me as a threat would finally see the truth. I wasn't the boy they ignored. I was the one who'd won. Back inside, Veronica's panic would spread. "How could he?" Zira would demand, her confidence crumbling. "He's nothing!" Veronica would shake her head, voice low. "He's not nothing! He's everything!" The realization would hit. They'd underestimated me, and now I held the keys to their world. The gallery, her pride, her legacy was mine. They'd never seen it coming. He didn't ask for anything, Vayanika would say, defeated. He just took it. The silence would be heavy, their world upended. I'd built my empire in the shadows, and now they couldn't look away. I didn't look back as I drove into the night. The need for their approval, the ache for their love, was gone. I'd spent years shrinking to fit their story, but no more. My phone buzzed. Frantic texts from Zira, Quila, even Toren. I ignored them. I'd taken what I needed, the strength to stand alone. The house, the gallery, their world. It would never be the same. My sisters, who'd basked in Vianika's light, would see me now. Not as the quiet brother, but as the man who'd rewritten the rules. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who'd fought for his place. Someone who didn't need their cheers to know he'd won. I'd closed the door on their world and stepped into mine. A future I'd built, free from their shadows. The boy they'd overlooked was gone. In his place was me, unapologetic, unstoppable, and finally free.